Ladies and gentlemen, linear fusion rifles are in a weird spot in Destiny 2, and they have been for quite some time. I like to more deeply explore the buff and remove them debate, and give you some solid numbers to back it up. This is a weapon class that I truly enjoy using, but the bulk of the community doesn't seem to be equipping them all that often. Why? Generally speaking, I'd say it's because they're in the heavy slot, and there are a whole slew of heavy weapons that are very strong. There is one outlier though, that being Arbalest, a kinetic linear fusion rifle that is fueled by special ammo. And I'm more or less going to use this as a measuring stick as we move forward in this video. Arbalest is a great gun. It comes with the intrinsic trait Compounding Force, stating that this weapon fires slugs that cause massive damage to elemental shields of enemy combatants. This functions extremely well. And this is backed up by Disruption Break, where a 50% damage debuff is applied to a target versus kinetic weapons on a shield break. This essentially gives Arbalest the ability to buff its own damage output. And yet, in PvE, this weapon sees very little play. It's sitting at the 164th most used gun in general PvE usage according to Destiny Tracker. So if this weapon can entice players to engage with the weapon class more, even as a special weapon, how can the rest of the weapon class keep their head above water when sitting in the heavy slot? Well, they kinda can't. When looking at the usage of linear fusion rifles in PvE, the first one we come to is Corsair's Wrath, sitting at number 80. And this is a weapon that just got released. It's got that new car stink all over it still. Plus, this is a legendary weapon, so it's easily masterworked to generate orbs and doesn't take up your exotic slot, and it's still way down the list. What about the exotic linear fusion rifle sitting in the heavy slot? Well, there's two of them, and I do want to leave Sleeper out of the conversation because it's kind of its own beast. But what about Queenbreaker? Here again, a really cool weapon that I really enjoyed using back when it was released in Forsaken, largely due to the fact that it was carrying like 900 times more aim assist than it was supposed to, but it's a unique and interesting gun. The wire rifle intrinsic trait allows Queenbreaker to fire a long-range precision bolt that blinds enemies on hit. It has a choice between two sights, the long-range marksman sight or the short-range combat sight. And not only do these two sights affect the visual performance of the weapon, but they also play into the weapon's stats. Plus, to throw in a little more versatility, you have the choice between quick draw or hipfire grip. So yeah, like I said earlier, unique and interesting weapon. And it's one that hardly sees any play, sitting all the way down at 242 on the PvE usage list. Why is this so? I mean, what's the problem here? An argument that's often presented is they're just not hitting hard enough given the charge time. I mean, they are hitting, but maybe not quite as hard as they need to be to keep pace with other heavy weapons. So let's take a look at some damage output with Queenbreaker and Arbalest. And to really dig into things, we're gonna have to establish a solid fire rate, since the only number that Bungie's giving us is an arbitrary charge time. Queenbreaker with the combat sight has a charge time of 300. I found that I could fire 3 rounds in almost exactly 2 seconds. This equates to firing 90 rounds per minute. With the marksman sight equipped, charge time listed is 633. The max fire rate I was able to achieve was 3 rounds in 3 seconds. So that's 60 rounds per minute. If we look at Arbalest, charge time listed is 533. It took me 2.75 seconds to fire off 3 rounds. That's putting us just over 65 rounds per minute. Now that that's established, we can look at the damage output. When using Queenbreaker with the combat sight, a crit versus Carl is registering for 20,517 points of damage, putting the damage per second at 30,775.5. With the marksman sight equipped, we're hitting for 28,408 points of damage. Since we're shooting at 60 rounds per minute, that's 1 round a second, this is our damage per second. With Arbalest, we're connecting for 23,242 points of damage on a crit. Firing at 65 rounds per minute, our damage per second comes in at 25,568. So while the damage values are a good bit higher with Queenbreaker, we are looking at special versus heavy ammo. But what if we compare these damage numbers to a couple other heavy exotics? With Whisper of the Worm, a crit is hitting for 20,946 points of damage, and keep in mind this is without Whispered Breathing activated. The fire rate is 72 rounds per minute, which puts our damage per second at 25,135. The damage per second is actually lower than both Queenbreaker and Arbalest, but you do have to factor in that white nail perk when you're looking at Whisper of the Worm, because that's its biggest selling point. If you never miss a crit, you never have to reload, which still makes this a top tier option for sustained DPS. If we're looking at Xenophage, we're hitting for 15,322 points of damage. This weapon can't crit, so ease of use is through the roof since all you have to do is aim at center mass. This weapon's firing at 120 rounds per minute, so 2 rounds per second. Our damage per second is going to come in at 30,644. And with a 12 round magazine, we have great sustained damage here also. Or, I mean, if you're in an engagement where you can get right up tight to the boss, you can just throw on the Lament and do that. So when looking at Queenbreaker, I mean, the damage is there, the gun does hit. From what I can see, it's mainly that sustained damage where this weapon's getting knocked back a peg. So if we just took the whole weapon class and increased the damage just a little bit, would it help matters? I mean, yeah, it obviously wouldn't hurt its cause. Would it be enough to unseat some of the more heavily used heavy weapons? That's hard to say. But what if we rounded up all the linear fusion rifles and changed them to use special ammo? And I know, we're approaching a slippery slope as far as PvP is concerned, but I'm gonna get to that. An argument made in favor of this change is that a standard sniper rifle does the same job as a linear fusion rifle and does it better. So I wanted to test this out. I took Bite of the Fox, an aggressive frame kinetic sniper, and crunched the numbers. It's hitting for 17,625 points of damage on a crit and shooting at 72 rounds per minute. This puts the damage per second at 21,150. And this is a kinetic weapon, so it is seeing slightly increased damage. But I also wanted to test another archetype. Widow's Bite, a rapid-fire sniper rifle, hits Carl for 10,343 points of damage on a crit. This weapon's shooting at 140 rounds per minute, so as far as damage per second goes, we're looking at 24,134. And I really don't want to compare these two legendary sniper rifles to an exotic linear fusion rifle. So let's dig out a legendary linear fusion rifle like Komodo. And yes, this is about to be sunset, but I felt like taking it for one last spin. We're looking at a charge time of 466, and I found I was able to fire 3 rounds in as little as 2.6 seconds. This puts it at right about 70 rounds per minute, and is hitting for 24,461 points of damage on a crit. The potential DPS here, 28,538. So when just looking at raw damage, a standard linear fusion rifle does best that of sniper rifles. And obviously, there's a whole lot more we could be looking at here. We could take into account magazine size, ammo reserves, reload speed, the time for the weapon to settle in for the next shot, I mean, the list goes on. But just given the damage numbers we're seeing, if we did shuffle linear fusion rifles to use special ammo, maybe a PvE damage reduction would be necessary, or an increase to the charge time. Moving into PvP, and I am going to focus on the two aforementioned exotics, Arbalest and Queenbreaker. Performance-wise, the two weapons are not all that dissimilar. Looking at the two weapons side by side, Queenbreaker does carry some variation due to the scope selection. And overall, generally speaking, it does have better stats. But Arbalest being a special weapon is going to have greatly increased uptime in the Crucible. But let's look at some damage numbers, starting with Queenbreaker with the Marksman sight. A crit's going to hit for 542 points of damage, downing absolutely anything. And a body shot's going to hit for 181 points of damage. But with a 20% damage buff, we can one-shot to the body, dealing 217 points of damage. With the combat sight equipped, a crit hits for 392 points of damage, and a body shot lands for 131. With a 20% buff, the combat sight is not going to one-shot body, only dealing 157 points of damage. Moving over to Arbalest, we are going to crit for 497 points of damage and register 166 points of damage on a body shot. So this is more or less falling right in the middle of Queenbreaker's scope options. A 20% buff on Arbalest is going to one-shot body most resilience tiers with 199 points of damage. And with that 25% damage buff from Whisper of Hedrons, we are going to deal 207 points of damage, ignoring any resilience. So just damage-wise, there's really nothing that one can do that the other cannot. But say we changed them to special ammo. They kind of walk the same path as an aggressive frame sniper rifle in the sense that they can one-crit a roaming super. But at least in the case of Arbalest and Queenbreaker, they can deliver that one-hit kill body shot if they're under a 20% damage buff. With Arbalest being an exotic, maybe this is okay since it is burning that exotic slot. But with legendary linear fusion rifles, not all of them are going to be able to pull this off. But there are some that can. Ones with faster charge times, like in the 400 range, are not going to one-shot to the body when under a damage buff. But when you start getting up into that 500 charge time range, these ones can secure that one-shot kill. So there is the potential that this could become an issue also. And then the aim assist is probably going to need brought down a touch too. If you look at the usage rate for Arbalest in competitive PvP, it is sitting at number 9. And I would say this is largely due to the fact that this weapon is incredibly sticky when using a controller. And while it's not as good on PC, I gotta say, it is still incredibly forgiving. I mean, I'm not a top tier Crucible player by any means, and my aim is mediocre. But my shots tend to land very consistently with linear fusion rifles, especially Arbalest. There were plenty of times where a shot snuck in and clipped a player's head when I was dead certain that I missed the shot. So yeah, maybe the aim assist needs toned down a little bit. with the exception of Queenbreaker. You have a big chunky sight that's really limiting visibility everywhere except in the sight glass itself. And with Arbalest, we have a nice compact sight with a wide open field of view. I think it's a reasonable trade-off. And honestly, in my recent experiences with Queenbreaker on mouse and keyboard, it does not feel to have as much aim assist as other linear fusion rifles. So when taking a step back and looking at the weapon class as a whole, what do we do with linear fusion rifles? They're not getting much play as a heavy weapon, even though the damage output isn't far off from where it needs to be in PvE. Me personally, I would like to see them moved to the special slot. Now some tuning would be necessary for sure, no matter which side of the game you're looking at. But I would like to see these weapons brought into a position where more people would be inclined to use them. Given all the great heavy weapons out there, that slot just seems like a really tough spot for this weapon class to get any traction. But in the end, it doesn't matter what I think. I'm a dumb ironworker with a small YouTube channel, and I'm not silly enough to believe that anyone who matters gives a darn about what I say. Plus, this isn't exactly a front burner issue. There's plenty of problems in Destiny 2 right now that need addressed far before linear fusion rifle tuning. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about it in the comments. I put out a poll the other day to kinda let you guys voice your opinion, but did the damage numbers here surprise you? Were they higher or lower than you expected? And if you did have a preconceived notion about what should be done with linear fusion rifles, did any of this information change your mind? Let's talk about it down in the comments. But if you did enjoy this video, please remember to leave it a like and consider subscribing to the Ironworker Gaming channel if you're digging the content and you'd like to see more. If you'd like to catch me live one of these days, I will be streaming right here on YouTube. And if you'd like to contact me, you could join our channel Discord, link will be in the description, or you could just drop me a comment down below, and I'll do my best to get back to you. And with all that being said, I'd like to thank you for taking the time out of your day to check out this breakdown. You guys are awesome, and I will catch you on the next one.